Hi everyone, my name is Brianna Buchak, and this presentation is going to dive into the life and vocation of Sarah Grimke. A little bit about why I chose to do this presentation on Sarah Grimke is just mainly because I had heard a little bit about her from one of the presentations we had done in this class, and then it also kind of aligned with many of the things I have been learning in one of my sociology and literature classes this semester, and I thought it would be really cool to do some research on her and go a little bit deeper into some of the Quaker women, especially this one who I had not heard much about prior to doing this presentation. So diving into a little bit about her background, here is a picture of her family that will just kind of make everything make a little bit more sense. Basically, she was born in Charleston, South Carolina on November 26, 1792. And she had many siblings, even though it only showed her and her sister in this picture on the left here. And she also came from a very wealthy family of slaveholders, where she was able to see kind of the whole picture of what slavery looked like at this time, where she was able to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of how slaves were treated and the benefits throughout this time. And so, one of the facts is that kind of touching on this, she grew up on a plantation, and this really developed this desire for Sarah to help African American people and just those who were treated unfairly in general throughout her life, and doing her best to help them. And then another fun fact about her as she was growing up was one time she was helping a maid with her reading skills, and the maid was actually punished, and there was nothing Sarah could really do at the time. And even though her parents really did not allow her siblings to help educate the slaves, because that would just give them too much privilege, she decided she wanted to do that anyway. So, going into a little bit more about her adult life. So, on the left here, you can see kind of the picture that she grew up in, or a picture of the home that she grew up in. And so, she lived a very nice life. But when she in the year of 1819, her father was very ill, and she had to go visit him in Philadelphia. And this was a big pivotal point in her life. And so Sarah was able to meet a lot of new people in this area of the country, and she joined and met a new community of Quaker women. And in 1821, and throughout those couple of years while she was there, Sarah became a part of the Quaker religion. And so throughout her life, she started to learn about what it was like to be a Quaker, and also grew up with this really strong understanding of the injustices throughout this country, and had a heart for change, and really wanted to contribute to the life of helping others and helping throughout the anti-slavery movement. I labeled this little section as Mother of Suffrage because that was the name that she acquired throughout the years. And I think this is really important to what she stands for. And so this also talks about how she kind of decided she did not want to get married for a specific reason. And that was because she didn't want to become like a slave over just a wife to a husband. And she really put herself first in understanding that she did not want to be put down as a woman, because she knew that women and people of color were not really treated fairly in this time throughout the country. And there was really just so much controversy revolving women at the time. And so it was just really interesting for me to kind of learn about the women at this time, and also in my other classes from women who were living hundreds of years later after Sarah, and how they were still continued to be put down. And so I think it's just really sad but eye-opening to see how so many people were fighting throughout these centuries, and yet women were still not treated fairly throughout all of those years. So, going a little bit into her impact on many people, here we can see on the left there is an image of her with many women in the National Women's History Museum in New York City. And so, although I wasn't able to do a virtual tour or go there myself, it's really cool to just see that she is in there and was impactful enough to make a stance for so many women around the United States. And I just think there were so many unique women in the abolitionist movement. um, and so, but Sarah and her sister were just so unique because the work they put in and how much they believed in themselves, um, and believed in fighting for the truth. And so they were able to put their work into action and testify for Black people in this country who had limited rights, and especially amongst the lack of women's rights as well. And so, as a women's rights activist, Sarah and her sister were some of the first women to testify for Black rights in front of the legislative branch of the United States, which was really cool. And so prior to the 1800s, this was very unusual. And women who tried to do anything remotely equal to men, or their jobs or in the workplace, this was very harshly criticized. And so, as Sarah Grimke began to fight throughout the Quaker movement, as time progressed, the women started to find more equality in comparison to men and women, which was really important. So, moving on to a little bit of religious background. So, during the Quaker movement, the Quakers believed that everyone is unique, and that God is within everyone. And so, um, Sarah and her sister really seeked these religious truths. And this religion just really appealed to women at the time because it provided them an opportunity to follow their heart and gain liberty and freedom, and kind of just dive into a lot of literature and writing, which wasn't very usual at the time. But unfortunately, because of the times, this religion was still very male dominated. Going into a little bit about Quaker women, so people were still discouraging women to speak up at this time, like I've talked about, but they were still able to be teachers, which was really cool because, like I mentioned in the beginning, when they tried to educate others, such as the slaves, this was very discouraged because even Sarah and her siblings were taught by their older brothers, and that wasn't really in the role of the women at the time. So this was a very big movement, and Quaker wives were starting to be seen as equal to their partners, which was really important. And even when this was not the case in the United States, um, Sarah was able to make a lot of progress in these areas. And the Quaker influence, so the first women's right convention was a success throughout the Quaker religion, which was really cool. And they started seeing Quakers take public action, even though this wasn't really successful and many women were timid. Sarah was able to take action, um, and even though they were not supposed to be done by a woman, she was able to fight, and just supported abolition and fighting for all people to have equal rights. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about her legacy and how she's remembered today. And so, Sarah actually published a series of her letters in New England, and these letters were supported by other activities. And this was her opportunity to speak up and get her voice heard. And these letters had opportunities for them to for her to end up speaking in over 60 different cities throughout the United States. And some of her writings include letters on the equality of the sexes, which was, again, a combination of a lot of her letters written down, and then Conditions of the Women in 1838. And I think just the goal of her writing in general was to promote racial and gender equality, which she did a really good job, because we still have access to these books today. And so even though I did not have any physical artifacts or get to go into any virtual museums or monuments, I was able to find some really cool images of her and her story. And I think this shared a lot about how she fought for all women at the time. And as a white woman, she was able to see the cruel effects of slavery firsthand, just in South Carolina as she grew up. And so her writings, I think specifically, show a lot about how strong she was and being able to be one of the first women to speak publicly about just kind of against slavery and going against what women were expected to do at this time. And she took her background and experience and fought for this main goal. And so I think just some of the remaining questions I have that I would maybe like to do some research on or ask if I were to ever ask someone, I would love to know what like the biggest struggles for her were to overcome. I would also love to know at what point did she feel she was able to make a contribution for women, and at like what point was that at? And then another question I would ask would be just like wondering if she ever grew up around any like-minded women or females who also accepted the white privilege they had, but kind of just either had to allow men to walk all over them or also saw the problems that she recognized at such a young age, and how that kind of um, was like to grow up around such different females at the time. And then lastly, here is my works cited. Thank you so